Imagine leading an organization in a country where markets are thin, climate shocks are constant, and financing gaps can stall national development. How do you build strategy that survive this much volatility? Well, if you ask me, strategy cannot be static. It must adapt, respond, and pivot, and constantly connect the dots across climate, capital, regulation, community needs. Today on this Strategy Playbook, we will explore the real-world application of one of the most important ideas in modern strategic management, dynamic capabilities. And to bring this to life, we are joined by Maheen Rahman. She is the CEO of InfraZamin Pakistan, a pioneering credit guarantee institution. InfraZamin is an organization that quite literally connects the dots between the regulators, banks, private sector sponsors, climate realities, national needs, and the global development finance. This makes it one of the most compelling living example of dynamic capabilities in Pakistan today. In this episode, we'll ask, how does organization sense, seize, and reconfigure when the biggest risks come from climate shocks, capital scarcity, and institutional gaps? How do you build a process-driven organization in a country that has historically been people-driven? And how does a leader stay effective and authentic in a sector which is dominated by men? And what skill do young professionals, especially women, need to thrive in Pakistan's evolving infrastructure ecosystem today? Well, by the end of this conversation, you'll understand how strategy actually works in real boardrooms in an emerging economy where uncertainty is constant and the impact matters as much as performance. My name is Dr. Mohsin Kazmi, and this is Strategy Playbook, made in Pakistan. Let's dive in. Just to get everybody up to speed of those who will be watching this, we have with us today Maheen Rahman, who is the CEO of one of the great companies that I have recently explored, InfraZamin, a pioneering credit guarantee institution. Maheen, we have seen your interviews in the past, and based on what I understand, you repeated the word over and over again in all of the interviews, and I repeat the same thing in my classes, which is connecting the dots. You say InfraZamin is in the business of connecting dots. What does connecting dot really means inside InfraZamin?
Sure. So maybe I step back a bit and I talk a little bit about InfraZamin and what we do here. So InfraZamin is fundamentally a development financing institution, and we are here to catalyze private sector investment into long-term infrastructure projects specifically for Pakistan. And the way we do that is using credit enhancement facility that we have from our own balance sheet. And fundamentally, what does that mean? I think in Pakistan, if you're aware, it is usually quite challenging and difficult to get a loan from a bank. There are many conditionalities and there are many requirements that a bank has before financing can be availed from them. Now, what that happens in Pakistan is it leaves a huge gap in the access to capital story. And because of that, businesses will find it problematic to access growth capital, especially for longer term projects. So what does InfraZamin do? We are a AAA rated by Pakra institution. We have our own balance sheet. We are supported by the Pidge Group in London, as well as Karandas here in Pakistan. And our focus is to be that catalyst. So we provide guarantees to banks against which they can lend. And what that does, it opens doors to multiple sort of transactions that otherwise would probably not have happened in the Pakistan context. So, there's a whole host of transactions that we've done already on our website. Now, what do we mean when connecting the dots? An institution like InfraZamin cannot operate without an ecosystem, right? Without having the right ecosystem, which looks at regulation, looks at policy, looks at regulators, looks at government, looks at the private sector, looks at the financial institutions, and the infrastructure requirements for the country as a whole. So a lot of our work in the last 5 years has also been spent on capacity building of these various institutions, as well as, I would say, specifically financing partners. And that's what we mean by connecting the dots. We are trying to create that ecosystem whereby the awareness of how to do long-term infrastructure financing, how to do sustainable financing, how to do climate financing, is then becomes an intelligence point for all of us to create.
Interesting. Well, walking back, I notice you have a really diverse background, investment banking, research, asset management, and now in infrastructure guarantees. I mean, talking about your career, how do you connect all these dots? How does it shape your worldview when it comes to you being a CEO?
No, I think that's a great question. So the common thread in all of my experiences is obviously finance, because that has been the backbone of all of my assignments. I think that the other commonality that you will see is a lot of my work has revolved around inclusion and financial access. So whether we do investment banking for a big tier investment bank, or you do it for a company like InfraZamin, which is a different league on the scale, or you do asset management, which is really just about increasing the pool of savers and investors in the country. The common theme behind all of them has been growth and expansion of the underlying financial ecosystem through that access to finance piece, or access to savings, or access to financial knowledge. So, if you ask me what drives me, that would be the core theme throughout all of it. And I think these are things that I've developed over time. I think going into finance in my first few roles, I wasn't certainly in that zone. I was more in the zone to learn. But gradually, as you progress, you realize the gaps in the system. You realize the problems that are endemic, and you try, and if that's a passion, and that was a passion for me, I was trying to find ways to solve those gaps. So hence, I think that's sort of why you see that journey as it is.
Oh, that's fascinating. You've often emphasized that organizations should be process-driven rather than people-driven. That's quite the contrary of what we teach in an MBA. We always say to them, hey, let's put people first. You're saying let's put processes.
So it's interesting you're raising this point, because I was just having this discussion on another forum yesterday on process versus people. So here's the thing. Good people will not necessarily bring together a company if there are no good processes, right? So the process is important to build the institution. And then when you build the process, you realize the kind of person that you need within that process itself, or within that institution itself, right? And the process is everything. The process is everything from your vision, your mission, your governance, your purpose, what the organization stands for, the value system. And then within that, how do all of those big picture items trickle down into day-to-day operations? That for me is quite crucial, because you do have, you'll see all sorts of companies in Pakistan. You'll see the very small entrepreneurs, you'll see the very large conglomerates, but all of them within the ambit of what transfers them from becoming small companies to transitioning into large companies is really a redefinition of that process at various stages, and realizing that that defined process may need different types of people to take it to the next stage of growth. So I think we have to stop treating an organization like it's a personal mission. An organization is an entity. It's an independent entity, and it requires certain things over its lifetime to grow. And I think that's what my point is on process, that you can be small and do everything in a very centralized manner, but you will not get to be the large company that you can be if you don't implement the governance standards, the processes, and create that ecosystem to transition. And I will also say this, that you need people. However, you need different people for different stages of growth and different roles. And you can have people in the organization that have been around 25, 30 years, but they could just be in the wrong role. And you have they align with the values, etc., but they don't necessarily align with what the company needs them to do now.
Mhm.
Right. So you have to think of those transitions as a corporation changes and it grows. Otherwise, you will end up becoming, I would say, a little bit stagnant. And I think it's always important as an organization to maintain a growth mindset.
Excellent. So when you say these processes,
Hmm.
does it also account for strategy? Do you
Of course.
strategize? Do
Of
you
course.
put it in writing? How does this
Yes.
boardroom discussion flows at Infra?
Yes. So let me make a very controversial statement, which is I truly believe that strategy and the direction of the company start and end with the CEO.
Mhm.
I think you have all the guardrails in place by the board and the shareholders, and I think you have the team always supportive and responsive to that. But it's ultimately that CEO which is responsible for taking that company forward and executing on the broader mandate. And how they do it is what we call the strategy. Right. So if I take an example of Al, right, which is I took over that company 2013 when it was a very small asset manager. And the desire of the shareholders was just simply, I want to see growth,
Mhm.
right? The Al Group wanted the AMC to do well, wanted to do group, but that strategy was fundamentally up to me.
Mhm.
And I could have taken several different routes on it, and I chose a particular path, and it worked. And how do you assess that strategy? You need to really break it down into a 2 or 3 year plan.
Mhm.
Because I think unless you have a clear picture of where you want to be in 3 years and you are able to milestone that and goalpost that, um, that's where the accountability also happens, right? So you must be in a position to put it down not just in words but also in numbers and
Yeah.
define very clearly that this is the strategy we're going to follow. And you assess yourself every 6 months to every year. And if that strategy is not working or an aspect of it is not working, then you need to pivot
Mhm.
and you need to be flexible and figure out something else that is going to work better. So I think the strategy can be something that changes over every 2 years or so.
Mhm.
But the vision and mission of the organization, which is growth, which is financial inclusion, always stays in place. And similarly, when I came to InfraZamin, the purpose was let's catalyze large amounts of financing to private sector projects. And to give you an idea of how problematic the situation is right now, I think less than 15% of it, the current stat is something like 12% of GDP goes to private lending in this country. Emerging markets, and I'm sure your students have studied those. Emerging markets are in the range of 50 to 60% of GDP going to private lend. That's the difference between being able to provide growth capital to your companies, right? If you don't provide that capital, they're not going to grow. It's quite simple. Or they're going to look for informal means, or they're going to look for other ways, right? So our view is how do we open up various sectors?
Mhm.
So the strategy was we need to provide that capital. How are we going to do it? The strategy is let's focus on the sectors which are underserved, where the risk is not fully understood, and can we find projects to demonstrate how lending can happen in those sectors? And so with that strategy in mind, we focused on agriculture. We did agricultural storage. We've done gender. We've done decarbonization, solarization. We've also done a bit of trade finance, and we're looking at multiple other sectors which are, sort of less served by the banking space. So, that is the strategy you come with. And every 2 years, we design the strategy with the board, the team, and we get buy-in. And every 2 years, we reassess where we stand and whether or not that strategy needs to be adjusted. But the overall vision and mission always stays the same.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of back and forth, and I completely understand the fluid nature of strategy. It has its own complexities, but
Mhm.
you are in an industry which is predominantly a male-dominated industry. Uh,
Mhm.
Being a female in this industry, does it add to complexities, or does it make life easier? How is it like being a female CEO in an industry?
I mean, we will need a lot more than the time we have allocated today to talk about the gender issues in finance. But in a nutshell, I would say that it's, you can't come into any industry or any role thinking with a gender lens. You come in to do a job,
Mhm.
and you do what you need to do to get the job done. Now, the gender role is secondary. As a CEO, you will not survive, if the role or the demands of the role are not met. Having said that, I think there is a growing greater acceptance of women leaders in Pakistan. There's a lot of respect also given to women leaders in Pakistan. The journey to become that woman leader, though, is has a lot of challenge, and I think a lot of the challenge is not just in the corporate workspace. A lot of that challenge is cultural,
Mhm.
and at home. So I think one of the biggest issues that we see in corporate Pakistan is dropping out when a lot of women drop out when they have children, and that's fine because obviously there is a biological requirement, right? I think the way I managed it was, and I have three children, so I've been through that cycle. But the way to manage it is, you have to make sure that you take those career gaps when you need those career gaps, and don't look at it as an if and or scenario, right? You can take a break in your career if you want to raise your family, and then you can go back into your career. And I'm a firm believer in that. I think when a woman comes back into the workspace, she comes back with much more maturity. She comes back with an amazing sense of multitasking, and she comes back with the same, if not more, skill set she had when she left. So for me, it's recognizing when you need to take a step back, but coming back. And I think that's the key thing. A lot of women don't come back.
Yeah.
I think that if they did come back when their children were older, even if it's a 2, 3, 4 year age gap, they would find their careers very rewarding for them in the long term. And similarly, organizations now don't want to lose good talent. In Pakistan, the talent drain, the brain drain is real. And you always want to bring back an employee that has contributed positively to your organization in the past. So I think organizations are now slowly becoming very open to those ideas of career gaps. And if they're not, then certainly they need to be to avoid losing people or losing expertise more in the future.
Yeah, I mean, excellent. Just pivoting away, as you said, to a topic that is close to your heart, climate. You've said that
Mm.
climate is the elephant that is already stomping on our infrastructure. How does climate
Mhm.
risk shape your strategic decision
So
making?
I think fundamentally, climate events now in Pakistan are annually becoming more severe
Mhm.
and causing tremendous damage, tremendous loss and damage. And in the past, as a country, we have been reasonably food secure.
Mhm.
We have been, we've had reasonable road and, bridge kind of infrastructure. So connectivity is reasonable in the country.
Mhm.
We've had good infrastructure with regards to telecom and digital, and these are sort of building blocks, right, that you can see. Um, where's the challenge now with the persistent sort of annual, whether it is flooding or drought or changing of seasons that we see happening in Pakistan? It is getting very difficult to forecast
Mhm.
how climate is going to impact us in the future. We know it's going to be a negative impact, but it's difficult to quantify. Now, I think if businesses today are not assessing climate risk in their long-term plans, they will suffer for it. I think you see a huge trend towards decarbonization or using solar panels, right? In Pakistan, it's an organic shift. The world is actually very curious as to how we have, gone down this very organic and, self-led growth in solar renewable energy. But here's the reality. If we have ground-mounted solar in flood-prone areas, particularly in the agri space and in tube wells, etc., which is very common, or if we have ground-mounted solar in factory spaces,
Mhm.
any flood, any event that is climate risk puts that infrastructure at risk.
Yep.
So actually, the things that you try to do to mitigate your infrastructure or mitigate your climate risk is actually still exposed to that climate risk in a different way. So while we've done a lot of work on mitigation, we haven't done any real work on, I would say, adaptation. And adaptation is what's needed to make Pakistan more resilient to the climate effects that we're seeing. I'll give you an example, another example. We had hailstorms in Islamabad, which were, I think, about 6 to 8 months ago, earlier this year, which were exceptionally damaging and very off-season. Those hailstorms damaged cars, solar panels, houses, and other, small infrastructure. And that entire insurance, that actually put pressure on all of our insurance companies in terms of payouts. And that eventually put pressure on our reinsurance partners internationally and put pressure upward on premiums. So you can see how climate events today are actually having considerable and real business impact for Pakistan in the future. So while it is good to assess all the risks when you're planning long term, if we don't consider climate today as a quantifiable risk and something which should be embedded in the overall cost benefit analysis that you do for a project, right? When you do an MBA, you do all this corporate finance modeling where you look at the working average cost of capital, all that stuff. If you don't build in quantifiable climate risk along with all the other aspects that you have in there, you are going to seriously underestimate the long-term risk that a project faces. So I actually think that we're the fifth most vulnerable country when it comes to climate change. I don't think we can ignore that much longer.
Yeah, makes last few questions, Maheen. Now, what you just said, this is out and open. As you said, this is elephant in the room. We all know this, and there has been this growing debate around climate and being more resilient going on. One of the essence of strategy is doing things differently. How do you do it differently at InfraZamin? Are you like another infrastructure, credit risk company, or you are different? What makes you unique in terms of strategy?
So our strategy starts and ends with development impact, right? So while the numbers are central to our credit risk assessment process, the starting point for us is what sustainable development goals can we help the country achieve or that project achieve? And how can we make that, enhance that? Or how do we translate that into the project feasibility itself? So I think you'll find a lot of consultants, look at sustainability as a separate portion of their expertise. I think we put sustainability front and center to pretty much everything we do. So we won't start a conversation with the company with how much money do you make on your bottom line and are you good credit risk. We'll start with conversations around how many new jobs can you create with this, how many women can be employed in your company, how much carbon emission can you reduce, what are the adaptation elements you can build into your project. So we start with those questions. And from those answers, we will then create the business case for that infrastructure to be developed. So it's a little bit different from how a regular consultant would perhaps look at it. And we're not consultants, we're financiers, and we're guarantors. So that's how we start the conversation. And we have turned down great projects which carry very good, solid financial backing, simply on the basis that their contribution towards development goals was not strong enough. And that's really how the ethos of InfraZamin is developed.
Interesting. I've got mixed feeling in my class. I've got students who are excited. I've got students who are concerned, looking at the role of AI in credit risk assessment. So, I mean, as you know, around the world, credit risk assessment is shifting towards AI. We have data analytics, predictive modeling. How do you see AI transforming credit risk assessment in Pakistan? And more importantly, what would be your word of advice for young people who are listening to this if they were to be in this space in terms of capabilities?
Right. So, I think with every new development in tech, and they're happening at lightning speed now, so I'm not an expert on AI, but here's where I think AI has helped us specifically. One, in terms of general analysis, right? So just crunching the numbers, crunching balance sheet, general analysis, throwing out, reducing the time taken on modeling and things like that. The other aspect we've used AI for is idea generation, where we could perhaps bring more development into a project, so idea generation. And the third is, I think, general internal communication, the ability to put together coherent papers, things like that is useful, but it's not perfect. We've not found AI as a perfect replacement for individuals. Let's just, put it that way. And maybe that's because our work is very specialized, and it's very, so I would say, human dependent on the kind of analysis and the creativity around that analysis which is needed. So I think for us, AI has been a useful tool, but it hasn't been a perfect solution in many ways. So I guess the advice I would give to students today, that it is a very tough world. There's a lot of competition. There are many sort of, I would say, certain jobs that are being very effectively replaced by AI, but I still don't see AI as really replacing human creativity, the way a human can actually solve problems in a quantifiable as well as a qualitative way. So, I don't see it as being challenging within our current work, but I can see it causing a lot of disruption, already has, in jobs which are very process oriented, very step-by-step oriented. I've seen situations where entire HR departments are actually replaced by AI. And that's because they've completely converted it into a process. Having said that, I mean, you still need a human at the end of it, right? So I would say that try and use AI as a tool, and you must definitely understand it and understand its principles and how to use it, because that's how you add value to any organization. Every organization wants to do AI. Not all of them know exactly how to do it, but if you can be that person who is able to bring that skill set into an organization, I don't see that as being difficult for you long term. Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, who would have thought Maheen Rahman, who was in for the processes, would end up being on the side of people? I mean, excellent. Thank you, Maheen. We are trying to connect boardrooms with classroom, and I think this conversation would really help our student understanding how things are done in the boardrooms. Thank you for taking the time out. This was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mohsin. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Maheen. Ciao, ciao. Pleasure.